So does your income right now feel like it's shrinking? Does it feel like your money doesn't go a long way? Does it feel like you almost have to work twice as hard, almost even 3 to 4 times as hard just to be able to make the same living? Now, here's what's interesting is we're going to be looking at data as far as the 61%. So 61% of basically the middle class is basically shrinking, and now basically it's about to now 50%. So the middle class is basically shrink from 61% of Americans to now 50% because most people are either getting to the point where they're in the lower class or upper class because the amount of money that's required to even live in America right now is almost 2, 3, 4x. So, and then what's crazy is this is most people's incomes are not keeping up with inflation. Most people's incomes are not keeping up with the cost of living. And we're also going to be looking at what the World Economic Forum had to say about the cost of living crisis. So just do my favor right now, guys. Go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and let's go ahead and dive. All right, so the first thing first is what I want to do is I want to go ahead and get started with there's a little bit of an interesting statistic and interesting stats that I want to go ahead and share with you guys, which is basically this is a Pew research talking about the fact that the middle class in America is basically shrinking. The middle class in America has gone from basically 61% back in 1979 to basically 1971 to now basically it's about 50% of the population, which basically when most people either leaning towards, if you look at the stats here based from 1971 data to 21 data right now. If we zoom in right here, guys, you're looking at the numbers here as far as here in the lower income. Here is about you have people either falling more into the low income. And what's also interesting here is you also have a lot of people rising and going up into the upper income. Now, what's interesting is this is the middle class in America no longer exists, which is they almost pretty much shrinking or basically dwindling down. So we're going to also be looking at a few data here, a few statistics here. So the median income of middle class Americans back households in 2020 was 50% greater than in 1970, from 90,000 to basically 59,000 as measured in 2020 dollars, right? Now, these gains were realized slowly, but for the most part steadily, with the exception of the period from 2000 to 2010. They call it the lost decade. But if you also kind of look at it from the standpoint here, if you look at the stats as far as how incomes basically varied, yet incomes rose the most for upper income households in U.S. from 1970 to 2020. Here you have basically the upper income 1970 upper income was about 130,000, so now upper income is around 219,000. Back in 1970 you had the middle class income being 59,000, now it's around 90,000. And if you notice, the lower income really hasn't really moved significantly if you're looking at that data. Now also what's also interesting here is you're looking at it, the share of basically the aggregate income held by US middle class has plunged since 1970. So it's not looking good, guys. It's not looking good, and most people now almost have to work. You need two household incomes to be able to even pretty much be able to survive. You need two household incomes to be able to make a living. There's number 4 stats here, which is very interesting. Is married adults and those in the multi-earner households made more progress up the income ladder from 1971 to 2021 than the immediate counterparts. So if you look at this data, and the reason why I'm bringing this data to you guys is I want you guys to kind of the main thing we're going to look at here is basically the wealth disparity. We're going to look at basically the income. We're going to look at the fact as far as the middle class is shrinking, and most things is because most people that are in the middle class are falling into the lower class because they keep trying to use advice that they're not being told the truth about what's out there. They're being given vehicles and instruments that ends up putting them in basically in serious damage and serious troubles. And we're also going to talk about the fact that if you're somebody who's close to or near retirement, how your 401k might not be even enough to cut it. And here's the interesting thing is most people never think about the fact, and you're probably not in a situation right now where you're thinking about the fact that you're saving money, but you're saving all this money, but are you actually going to have enough money when you retire? Because human beings are living 10, 15 years longer than we actually were living 40 years ago. So if we come back here into this data here, as we're sharing, as we're looking at this data here, guys, most of those who are married or in households with more than one earner are more likely to be upper income because you're looking at basically two incomes combined. So if you look at it here, so if you look at the comparison here, so married men, basically 21%, you are more likely to be in the upper income in 2021 just by being married than you were back in 1971, because obviously, as you guys know, now we have the man and the wife also working, right? So basically you have a high percentage of basically being in the upper class. Now if you're unmarried, what's also interesting is you also look at the fact as to almost like unmarried men pretty much made less money, and they had a least likelihood of actually getting into the upper class, and they had a more likelihood of staying in the lower class. Now there's a lot of serious factors that goes into that, but we're not going to cover that because that's beyond the scope of this video. Now it also dives into a little bit more things here, but Number 60, which is interesting here. So adults 65 and older continue to lag economically despite decades of progress, right? So they continue to lag economically despite the fact that despite gains, older adults in the US remain most likely to be lower income. Now that's various, you'll factor in a few things as most of them are on social security. Most senior citizens are at a point in which they have health issues that's prevented them from being able to work in the workforce, because I personally believe if most of baby boomers had they could work for 75, 80 years and their health was still 100%, they would 1,000,000% do it. I strongly believe that they would 1,000,000% do it if they were basically given that opportunity to be able to do so. Now, what's interesting here is just to, if we dive back into this data, we basically go ahead and dive back into this data here. If you look at it here from basically a comparison of age, you notice here between ages of 18 to 29, you had about 17% of people were in the upper income, but most people who's 18 to 29 honestly aren't really making that much money. And if you look at between the 30s to 44s, you still had a lot of people still in the low income side. But if you look at it from a perspective here on once people retire and over the age of 65, now they go into the position where they're more in the lower income, because in 2021 stats now it's 37% as opposed to 1971, which is also 54%. The data is I would say, if you ask me, the data is insane. The data is telling. The data is pretty much in a point to which is kind of like, listen, the finances right now is not getting any better. The majority of people are not in a situation in which they are actually making enough money to be able to survive. And if you're in a position in which you're like, you know what, I'm planning for retirement, here's the reality: is once you stop working, you're cutting your cash flow. Once you're cutting your cash flow, now what are you going to be relying on? What you're going to be relying on is going to be relying on your 401k. You're relying on your 401k because guess what? 401k is something that's fairly new. It's been around for about the past 30 years. And most people believe that the 401k, was something that was put in their best interest. It was something that was designed for, because the 401k was like, it's a retirement vehicle. The 401k is a very fancy deal. So I'm gonna again kind of give you guys a summary of what the 401k pretty much is, and what it basically does. So before the 401k came about, so the 401k pretty much replaced what do you call it, the pensions. So it replaced pensions. And what was pensions? Pensions was basically, so 401k came in November 6th of 1978, right? So it was implemented in November 6th of 1978. So the 401k came in with the point of replacing pensions, because most people saw with pensions that they were not able to, it was putting a lot of the responsibility for taking care of the person when they passed away on the employer, right? And now most employers were kind of in a point in which they're like, you know what, I don't want to bear the burden. So let's go ahead and shift this burden and put it back on the employees, right? Who give them a percentage, or give them like a 401k match, or in some way, shape, or form, will kind of go ahead and give them, some money to incentivize them rather than paying them a pension like the government does for service members. We would just basically give them the opportunity to invest in the market and take that money, and would also put a percentage of our money in there just to basically help them as well, as opposed to putting in a lot of our money in there, right? So it gives, basically put more money in the employers' pockets, which is good for employers. It sucks for employees. Now, most employees kind of got into the 401k, but now what was the 401k? Now, what's interesting about the 401k, we're going to kind of listen to it here, was the 401k was not designed for most people. The 401k is think about it as a position of, in a way in which you can put money in the market to grow tax deferred. Okay, tax deferred. So what does tax deferred mean? So tax deferred, I want you to think about tax deferred as a what is the word I want to look for? Tax deferred is, think about it in a sense as to, if right now you are basically in a position in which you basically owed the government, let's say you are in a tax bracket of 13%, right? And you made 10 grand. Right? What that means is basically you're giving $1,300 to the government, right? Now, rather than you being taxed at a specific amount of money, what you can do is say, you know what, if I make 10 grand, I want to contribute a specific amount. Let's say I want to contribute, 2,000 out of that 10 grand towards towards my 401k. What that means is this $2,000 remains untouched, and then you can tax me on it, when I take it out. Now, there's a few catch 22s to it, is because once you put your money in your 401k and you're younger than 59 and a half, you really can't really be taking anything, because you get hit with a penalty, an early withdrawal penalty, unless the government comes with something like a, hardship withdrawals, something like that, right? And then also, you also have to pay the taxes on it. So people came up with something like the Roth, you have the Roth, you have your 401k, Roth 401k, Roth IRA, which is like you'll put in already tax dollars in there. Now, I don't want to get too much into finances, but let's kind of look at just a quick overview for the most part. Is, if we're looking at just a tad bit of the differences here, if we're looking at it from a perspective of finances. So if we kind of have a two columns for the most part here, where we basically have a 401k here, and we have basically your, let's say, as opposed to your Roth, right? I'm not gonna dive into too much into the deep knowledge. It's something you can kind of research. It's not a finance lesson. So what it does is basically is the 401k, when you're putting money in the 401k, this is pre-tax dollars, which means this dollars. So the keyword here we're looking for is pre, and the keyword we're looking for anything that comes with Roth is post. Okay. So what that means is pre. So which means if I put $2,000 in here into my 401k, my traditional 401k, it means I have not paid any taxes on it, which means the 401k will now be taxed at the point of withdrawal, right? If I'm putting anything in the Roth, it means that I have already paid taxes on it. And so rather than basically deferring the taxes, I'm putting money that's already been taxed. So which means if I'm putting $2,000 here with no taxes, which means at some point, once it accrues, I have to pay the taxes on it, as opposed to the Roth. If I'm putting in post in there, what that means is this 2000 can be taxed at, however much percent it may be, which will probably put me at, maybe putting in $1,738 in there, right? So I'm probably putting in 1738 into the Roth, right? So the advantage of this is, one is I don't have to worry about taxes on the later on, but here I have to worry about pretty much the taxes for the most part, right? So now you're thinking about it from a perspective of, okay, Emmanuel, how does a 401k pretty much benefit me or benefit anyone I know or benefit anybody or any individual in the most part? That's where we're going to kind of get a little interesting, because I think most people, when it comes to the 401k, we need to understand, what is a 401k, and we need to understand why was a 401k designed in the most part. Who was it designed for? Was it designed for you and me, or was it designed for a specific group of people? Now, I want you guys to pay attention to this, to understand that 401k was not designed for you the way you're using it for the most part. So let's kind of dive into this right now, and I want you guys to.
In the 1980s, you worked for the company for 30, 40 years to give you a pension, which means they give you a paycheck after you retire. They would manage the pension plan for the employees. And then people started living longer and longer, so then longer than they projected to be paying people for. And then they're like, you know what? The company can't be responsible anymore. The employee has to be responsible. So they shifted to 401k plans. 401k plans was not designed as a mass retirement plan. It was a tax shelter that executives would put money and put bonuses into because they didn't want to be taxed on it right then. So the executive got a big bonus. He's like, okay, let's defer that to the 401k, let it grow. Wow, I can let this bonus grow for 10, 15 years. I'm going to be taxed on it now anyway. Why don't I defer and not pay taxes on it now, pay taxes on it in the future? That would make sense as a bonus structure. But then they couldn't recreate something new. So they said that 401k thing that the executives are using, make that available to everybody. So in the 1980s, you had that shift, and then you have all these people now starting to save for their own retirement without understanding stuff. In the 1980s,
So
you work
now what is what he's saying is basically it's not entirely in the sense of the bonuses, but primarily 401ks was designed for the C-suite executives and for most people as a tax shelter, right? So it's pretty much a tax shelter. Most people see it as an average, as a means of actual retirement, right? Most people see it as a means of actually, oh, I want to retire. So they say, okay, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and use my 401k, right? So what's also something that's very, very, very interesting here as we kind of navigate into the world of 401k is how much. I want you guys to take a list as you right now listen in the comments right now. Let me know, how much do you think is the average person? Do you think the average person is actually contributing or actually has in their 401k? Before we go ahead and dive into something else, but how much do you think the average person actually has in their 401k? If you had to guess, okay, if you had to guess, how much money do you think most people have in their 401k? Okay, and we're going to look at this basically based off of age. Okay, and we're going to compare it based off of age to see, what do you think? Do you think, people from 18 to 29 have what, 20 grand? How much do you think? Maybe 30 grand. Maybe, if you're 40, 45, you have 50 grand. Maybe you have 60 grand. Maybe they have 70 grand. Maybe it's 80 grand. Maybe, people are retiring, seniors are retiring at 65 with $1 million. You never know, maybe. But let's go and look at the numbers here so we can kind of see how much is it that people are actually retiring, as they get a little older. So as we come up here between the ages of 20 to 29, we're looking at people on an average of 40 on 401k, which average of 20, and between 20 and 29, you have an average of $12,000, which is very, very reasonable. And if you look at it between the ages of, what do you call it, as pretty much between 50 to 59, you have people pretty much with an average. This is basically based off of Fidelity. So this is off of Fidelity. So this is Fidelity reporting, and it is Vanguard reporting. So Fidelity is reporting between 50 to 59. Most people have an average of 175 grand. Now, if we look at the same stats here, if we look at the Vanguard, Vanguard is telling us that between the ages of 45 to 54 is 179,000. So it pretty much matches just about the same. Now, Vanguard has a little bit more detail as we go older. Now, as we get to 55 to 64, looking at 256,000, 279,000. That's good money. If you ask me, you have $279,000. It's basically 280,000. So what I want you to do is I want you to basically keep that in the back of your mind right now and say, you know what? I have $280,000 saved. I want to go ahead and keep it in here, right? Keep it in the back of your mind. You know, you're retiring 280,000. I want you to go ahead and keep it in the back of your mind. So what I'm going to dive into now, I want you to think about it, right? If you are 65 plus and you retired, how much do you think it's going to cost you to live? How much do you think is the average cost of living? How much do you think seniors actually spend between that, you know, whatever age it may be? How much do you think is the actual spend? So we're gonna go ahead and look at this data here really quickly. So basically, in 2021, the average spending for those age 65 or older was around $52,141 per year, which comes to around $4,345 monthly. If the retiree surveyed 40, so this was a survey. Of the survey, 48% spent under 2,000 monthly, 1 in 3 spent 2,030.99, and 18% spent over $4,399 in 2022. So an average retirees reported that 25% of their monthly spending went toward food expenses, which you got to eat. And food costs were reported as the fastest growing expense by 44% of seniors in 2021. So if we're looking at it, basically the average senior is basically in a point in which they're spending $52,000 per year. Now let's look at the math, right? We're doing 52. So remember this, guys. Remember this. Based on the last data we looked at, we had basically 280,000 was how much people had in their 401k to withdraw, and most people hadn't paid the taxes on it. I'm not even going to talk about the taxes on it. Let's say you took $280,000 alone. This was the market didn't crash the year of retirement. You didn't have anything happen, and you took 280 grand, and your bills was $50,000 a month, $50,000 a year. Right, so $50,000 a year on an expense of $250,000 gives you an average of 5.3 years of living. So you have roughly about 5.4 years of basically living expenses. So which means if you retire at age 65, by age 70, I'm going to start this again. If you retire at age 65, by age 70, you'll be out of money. So by age 70, you will be out of money. And the average life expectancy, guys, which is very interesting, is the average life expectancy is basically, what do you call it? The average life expectancy is around 76 years. This is 2021 data. So according to 2021 data, is 76 years. And basically, you're looking at about 76.4 years is the average life expectancy in the US. Now, this is if you're not a healthy adult or healthy individual. So you're looking at 76.4. Okay. Now, most people are actually living up to 85. Most people are living up to 90 years. So what that means is basically you are going to live longer than your 401k. You're going to live longer than your retirement. So what does that mean? That means that basically at age 70, you need to go looking for a job, because you don't make enough money. So at 70, you got to go look. You got to go sit there and say, who's hiring? They'll be like, Walmart's like, hey, we need a greeter, right? So now most people are kind of making the mistake of going into this 401k, thinking a 401k is some sort of retirement plan, not really understand that the purpose of a 401k was for the CEOs to basically grow your money on a tax deferred basis, right? So it is, in a way, it does act as retirement. If you are putting in 400 grand, if I put in 400 grand, and I put in 400 grand at age 35, at age 65, now I'm looking at a huge substantial sum. I'm probably looking at maybe 1.4 to 1.7 million, which basically, if I'm doing 50,000 a year, just doing the math, I would live, the 401k would live longer than me. But most people don't have access to this. So what is interesting is this: I want you guys to go. I'm going to go ahead and share this video, which kind of explains a little bit more as we dive a little bit more about the 401k, and we talk a little bit about more of the middle class. We talk a little bit more about what should you do right now if you're going to prepare, not just for retirement, but how do you prepare and take care of your family, and also make sure that you have the right expenses in place. So,
and if you're middle class, you're poor. What they do is they say, put money in a 401k, put money in an IRA, and you're like, yes, this will be what I need for retirement. But no one's doing the math. And here's what the math says. The 30-year average on the 401k, the 30-year average in an IRA, do you know roughly over 30 years what the average every year is earned in ROI?
I do not.
It's 5%. And the reason why that's poop is because you take $50,000, write this number down, with the passage of time, take 50 grand and ask what happens to it in a 401k over 20 years. It triples. it becomes $160,000. Now, on the one hand, someone might say that's pretty impressive. And I'm like, yeah, but did you know in the 60s, the average person's 401k and IRA is 200 grand. And at age 55, you've topped off your income at $94,000, which means that at retirement, you've saved 2 years worth of money. So after you have cut your expenses in half, you can maybe go 4 years before it's all dried up. It's poop again. So, and if you're middle class, you're poor.
So this is just basically proving my point. What he's saying is just basically proving my point and kind of getting to the point as to, hey, you know what, your 401k, I mean, it's great. I absolutely say this. Listen, I'm not against it. I think most people are going to watch this video and be like, Emmanuel, you against my 401k? I think 401k is good. If my company gives me 16%, 17% profit sharing, 18% profit sharing, 20% profit sharing, honestly, yes, what I have to say, I'm saying this is if you are in a position in which you are basically, your company will match you a percentage. Either if you put 4%, they match you 4%, or if you put 10%, they'll contribute. If you put $100, they'll contribute 60, whatever it is, they'll contribute 60% of your paycheck, whatever it may be. Then it's a no-brainer to you for you to not do the 401k, because it's basically free money and you're giving away free money. I'm not opposed to taking free money. So if it's a position in which you're going to get matched by your employer, then 100% do it. But if it's a position in which it's your own money, then you're better off investing in other vehicles that's out there. Now it all depends on this. So a lot of people are kind of like in the situation too. Now you're like on the fence as to like, okay, man, so what are you saying? What's most important to me? What should I input? What should I invest in? What basically should I do? Now, here's another thing is I'm not done talking about the 401k. We're not done about talking about 401k. So what's interesting is I want you guys to think about it from a perspective of how the 401k works. Okay. So the 401k, basically think about it as senses to your money is hedged in the market. So you have a percentage of your funds and you basically give it to Fidelity or Vanguard to manage your money. And then based off of that, you get 5, 6, 7%. Depends on how the market does, right? You all know the drill. We're not going to get too much into the math. We're not going to math the math, okay? But let's look at it from a standpoint. Let's look at it from a hindsight 2020 here, and say we have basically let's say we put 100 grand, right? Let's say we have 100 grand on 401k at age 40, okay? Let's say you have 100 grand into your 401k at age 40, and then the market drops 25%, okay? The market tanks 25%. So what does that mean? That means you're down now to 75 grand. Okay. Now you're thinking to yourself, okay, so how much does the market have to go up more for you to go ahead and make your 100 grand? Another 25%. Because if the market goes up, let's say the market goes up now 25%, right? You're like, okay, cool, nice. The market goes up 25%. Now let's do the math. What's 25%? Because remember, it's going up 25% of the current principal, which is 75 grand. So if we go 75,000 times 0.25, which means now you're up to 18,750. So which means you didn't go up that much. You're like, well, actually, you're right, Emmanuel. You're right. So if we're doing the math here now, 25% is not enough. So which means if the market now pretty much had to go up, right now, you're looking at roughly about, let's do the math here. The market had to go up roughly about 30. It has to go up about 33% to about 34% for you to basically go ahead and make your money back. So which means it's 34%. So 34% is basically the market has to go up by basically. So it's like 33.8% is what you're looking at. But basically, if the market goes up 34%, now you're up plus 34% of 75 grand. Let's go ahead and kind of make this a little bit cleaner, guys. So you're like, man, it's kind of a little messy, but let's say it goes up 34%. Okay. Let's say it goes up 34%. Okay. So 34% of 75 grand is 25,500. All right. So if we do 25,500 plus 75 grand brings us now to $105,000. Right. So which means the market has to go up almost 8% increase, right? 9% increase extra for us to be able to make our money. And the more the market tanks, the more the market has to actually overcorrect for us to actually get back to the point. So now that's the thing is if you lose money in 401k, the market has to work even harder for you to get it. So which means you're just basically in a position in which you're basically just gambling, right? You're basically in a position. I just realized, guys, I was not even sharing my screen this whole time, but you're just in a position right now. This is the math that I mathed at right now. You're basically in a position right now in which you have to work even harder just to be able to make the same amount of money. The market has to overcorrect for you to get to that point in which you actually are going to be able to make any money, just being in a significant, honest perspective there. So as a 401k significant investment, it honestly all depends on you, right? But let's look at the data, right, guys? Because remember, I like the data, I like the numbers. Let's keep going on the numbers, because remember, numbers is life, right? When you know the data, what gets measured gets improved, right? Measure what matters. So the average 401k balance has plunged 23% year over year due to market volatility. So which means the market, you had the pandemic, you had a few things that happened, so which basically caused a market volatility, right? So but people still believe in a 401k, which is perfectly fine. But if you look at it, a 25% drop is basically costing people here, because if you look at basically 2021, if you look at 2021 here, if we zoom in more on this data right here, guys, if you look at 2021 data right now, Q3 of 2021, you had basically 120. If you had 126,000 in your 401k, to Q2 104,000. This is just a 25% decrease. And now Q3, now you're down to 97,000. So that's basically almost a $30,000 drop. Okay, so which means in less than a year and a half, the market dropped 30 G's. Okay, so that means you just lost 30 grand. Ask yourself this question: is how much do you have to work to make 30 grand? Right? Because if you're in a position in which you make 60 grand a year, if you make 60 grand a year, that means you got to work an extra 6 months just to be able to compensate for the more the market's making. But not even just work an extra 6 months, because for you to put 30 grand, you have to, let's say you're saving, 6-7 grand a year, which if you do 6-7 grand a year, I commend you for that. If you're doing 6-7 grand a year, I genuinely say you're doing pretty good. You're doing really, really pretty good. But you have to put another 30 grand in your account. So which means if you're doing 6 grand a year, that means it would take you roughly about another 5 more years of basically putting money in your 401k, which means for every 1 year that's lost, it's going to take you another 5 years to add money in there. Just think about that. Each year costs you an additional 5 years of work. Okay, that's what happens when you leave your money in the market. Now you're like, Emmanuel, okay, now I'm kind of scared and worried. Do I go take my money out of my 401k? Because now I'm panicking. Now, I want to take my money to 401k? Don't take your money to 401k just yet, because then you're gonna get hit with penalties. You don't want to do that. There's a few things you can do. You can roll over the money into a few of the investment vehicles that's out there. But one of the things I want to talk to you guys about, I still say this is, I think for most people, especially if you're young and you can accept the risk, then just keep your money in the 401k. If you're a young individual, you're in less than, you're before your 40s, I think, yes, keep your money in the market. Absolutely, that's fine. You can afford to take the risk, right? If you can afford to take the risk, then keep your money in the market. Once again, guys, I also want to say that this is not financial advice from anything. This is just me giving you my 2 cents as far as what I would do. You can take that with your grain of salt as far as what you decide to do, but I'm just basically giving you my 2 cents as to what I think personally is something that I would do if I was in your shoes in that situation. So you can do that. Now, this is something that I've done. This is something that I have, which is something called basically, I pretty much I want a vehicle that's going to protect me from the market, right? So the first thing we need a vehicle that's going to protect us from the market, which means if you're in a position which you can't afford to lose money, or you're somebody who's like, hey, I like to mitigate risk. If you like my girlfriend and you don't like risk, this is something you're going to want to look into. So think about it in the perspective of you're like, all right, you know what? I don't want to, I want to, so we need a vehicle that basically mitigates our risk. Okay. Then also, we also need a vehicle that also, because you got to think about it, right? We don't want to be always working. What about if something happened? I'll tell you something, guys, which is an interesting thing. My mom was 30. She was in her mid 30s when she had a stroke, and which took her out of the workforce. My father passed away when he was in I believe his early 70s or late 60s. So these are things in which we do not plan for. These are things in which we don't know what's going to happen. And generally, we don't know what the future holds, right? No one knows what the future holds. Neither you nor I knows what's going to happen in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. That's all up to God. So that's why we pray and hope that God takes care of everything. But let's look at it from a standpoint and from a perspective. I want you guys to look at it from this very simple perspective of this. We need a vehicle that mitigates risk, because one, your 401k, it's not really mitigating risk, it's exposing your money more to risk, but it also gives you a probability of higher returns, right? There's people that can argue with that, but it gives you a possibility of higher return. But the one thing is, we need ability to mitigate risk. That's one. So the second thing we also need is we need something that basically insures us from life. Okay, we need to protect ourselves from life. Okay, so what happens if you were to, God forbid, you get sick and you can't go to work for, a period of time? You're like, Emmanuel, well, that's fine. You know what? I have, my job gives me short-term disability. Okay, that's fine. It gives you long-term disability, but you got to ask yourself, after a period of time, how long are you going to have the job? If you're out for 3 years, how long are you going to have the job for? Or 4 years? How long are you going to have the job for? Right? My father passed away from cancer. You never know what might happen if that's something that eventually does happen. Now, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is I'm basically trying to make you understand a point here, and so we can basically relate at it together. Okay, so if you look at it from the perspective of, we need something that basically protects us and ensures us in a sense of, if something were to happen, we all have loved ones. I have a son. I want to make sure my son's taken care of just in case something happens, because we're investing our money in the market so we have enough money to live out the last days of our lives, but we never know what might happen in between. So that's where this comes in. So we need we need a product that basically gives us, something more of, I would say, a investment in the market. So investment in the market. Okay, we need something that gives us an ability in investment in the market. That's one. So we need something to give us ability investment in the market, but not that much crazy returns, but it also protects our money, which means we have a 0% loss from the market. Okay, but there's also some few caveats there, because there's no such thing as 0%. There's always a catch to everything, right? So we need something that gives us a 0% loss from the market. Then we also need something that basically ensures our life and our health. Okay, so in case something happens, we can get cash up front. Okay, so we also need that for the most part. And then we also need something at some point that we can basically have it. Number three, we need something that gives us at some point ability to get cash flow when we retire. Okay, because the main thing here is when you retire, you don't have any money coming. So the most thing we need is something that gives us cash flow. We need cash flow. We need moolah. Okay, we need moolah coming in. Okay, we need moolah coming in. Now, for cash flow when you retire, now this is where it gets very interesting. This is a vehicle called the Index Universal Life Insurance. And I'm like, Emmanuel, oh my God, I don't like life insurance. Oh my God, Jesus Christ. Because whenever people hear life insurance, they think, oh my God, dying. You're not going to die. Okay, that's up to God. But what this basically does is, it's not even just more or less. Just forget. Let's remove the life and the insurance side of things. Okay, we're going to remove this. We're going to remove this side, but we're going to talk more about the index side of things. So what does this mean? This index is, think about it as to, let's say your market this was your money. You had all your dollars, right? Imagine this was your dollars and this was the market, right? So think about it like the sun, right? What happens when you get super close to the sun? You burn. Okay, you burn. My girlfriend had to learn this lesson in the beach. You burn. If you get too close to the sun, you burn. So what do? If you're like, okay, it's a really, really sunny day, I put on some sunscreen, right? You put on some sunscreen and you get an umbrella, okay, and you get in the shade. Okay, that's basically what we're talking about there. So you do all these things to protect you. Now, you could get in the sun and stay in the sun and get as tanned as possible, but you're gonna get so tanned that you're gonna look like it's Thanksgiving. Okay, so, but that's a bad joke there. But for the most part, you got to think about it from perspective as to, you need a tanning lotion. You need I can't tan, as you guys notice. Like if I try to tan right now, it's not even. It's a bad joke, but yeah, no. So you need something that basically protects you. So what an index does is, think about an index as, you basically have your money, but now your money has basically what is the word? Your money now has an umbrella, right? So it has an umbrella that basically protects it from the sun. So you still get some elements of the sun. You still get the benefits of the sunlight to a degree, but you're not getting all of it to the point in which is damaging you, giving you the results, but it's also damaging you, right? So think about it as senses to the index is, your money is hedged against the market, so you get a percentage, but you get a percentage, but you get a 0% floor. So what does that mean? That means if the market has been dropping 25%, you're not necessarily dropping 25%, but you also might be dropping -1%, because there's also management fees that's involved in running this. Okay, there's management fees that's involved in running this, right? So that's something that I want to kind of go ahead and cover there, because an index is not 100% something that's like, everyone's like, oh my God, index universal life insurance is not something that is. But you get the benefits of the fact as to, you might be getting, this is not a guarantee, but you might be getting about a 3%, right? You might be getting a 3% in the market. So maybe getting about 3% as opposed to 7 or 8% in the market. Just depends on basically, whoever you have set up and whatever it is that the cap rate, your participation rate and your spread is right. So the spread could just be everything from, your fees and everything that comes into play. And those are things that kind of affect it for the most part, right? But 78%, you keep getting this in the market, but you also have the probability of going down 25% as opposed to getting 3%, but a probability of getting 0. You have guarantee of 0%. But the only thing that's going to take you under is the fees, right? So that's kind of the only thing that you kind of want to kind of pretty much pay attention to for the most part, right? So that's basically what an index universal life insurance is. Now, I want you guys to kind of listen to a little bit more of an explanation as to what is a definition of an index universal life insurance, and then I want you guys to listen to someone else talk about, the pros and the cons and things in which people don't tell you as far as what IULs, what entails as far as what IULs are, right? So let's go ahead and give this a listen, guys.
An index universal life policy, or IUL, known in the industry, is a policy that has a death benefit, most importantly. Secondly, has the potential for cash value accumulation in a very tax efficient way. The money inside the policy grows tax deferred, very similar to a 401k and an IRA, but then on the back end can come out through lifetime withdrawals tax free. Currently, there are only 2 options for tax deferral growth and tax-free withdrawals. That is going to be a Roth IRA or personal life insurance through an IUL strategy. With a Roth IRA, there's a contribution limit. With an IUL, as long as you're healthy and can qualify and have the funds to do so, there is no limit.
So
an index universal
that's
life
basically
policy, or IUL.
the simple part of it. I'm not going to go into it, but then again, an IUL is not 100% what it's painted to be. It's not this Hail Mary kind of thing, because then again, everything pretty much has, its own pros, and everything pretty much has its own cons. And it's not, there is some truths to it that most people won't tell you. And at the same point in time, I want to go ahead and reveal that to you right now, so you pretty much know what you're pretty much getting into when it comes to an IUL.
So the greatest lie being told to you right now on TikTok by Index Universal Life agents is the fact that you can't lose your money, because the bottom line is you can lose your money, and people lose their money inside of Index Universal Life policies every single day. In fact, there are a plethora of class action lawsuits sealed up in arbitration and bound so people can't talk about them because they're settled. This is kind of like stuff that is gone hush hush in the industry. Now, the bottom line is you can lose money inside of Index Universal Life. And my encouragement to you is that you run every policy with income shown in it, because it's going to show more disclaimers. So you need to make sure you see that. Secondly, it's important to understand the spread rates, the cap rates, and the participation rates. All of those can be manipulated. So make sure you understand, you read all the fine print, go through line by line. And if you still feel good about it, then go ahead and buy, but I don't think you will. So
now here's the thing: this is the caveat to it, right? Which is very interesting to realize. This is, like I said, index. Every money market product is something that pretty much is everyone I recommend to do your due diligence. There's a few people that I do not recommend index universal life insurance for. I personally have it because it makes more sense for me, because I don't necessarily watch my money so much. I just kind of want something that's set up for my son when he has something. So this is something that you can set up for kids. Have it built up for my son. It's something you can set up for yourself if you're a low risk individual. But what he was talking about is to the IUL participation rate. So the IUL participation rates are very different from cap rates, right? So let's see if I can get cap rates here. So cap rates is a cap rate places a limit on how much the cash value of the policy can be credited. A policy with cap rate cannot be credited more than the declared cap rate by the insurance company. So which means they tell you how much, whatever it is, at the maximum that they can give you on. For instance, the cap rate is 14%. If the policy cannot be credited more than this, if the index. So basically, what is it? Think about a cap rate as to the best way to think about it is to, if the market does well and the market does 25%, but then you're capped at 14%, that means that the insurance company gets to keep the 11%. Right, you're giving them that. That's basically, think about it as your price for protection, right? So that's what the cap rate is. So the cap rate is basically, you don't get full market participation. You get just basically a percentage of what the market gives you based off of what the insurance company says. This is the maximum. That's our cap rate. Now, the participation rates basically, so the participation rates are very different from cap rates. So participation rate can best be described as the percentage of the total index period return the policy would be credited. So basically, think about it. If the crediting has a 90% participation rate and the index returns 10%, the policy is rate is 9%. So 10%. So basically, think about it. It's based off of how much your participation is, and then you get a percentage of the return. So which means it's not the same as you. It's still just telling you that your policy is limited as to how much money you can basically keep in the pocket, right? And then the spread. So the spread is just basically, because remember, this is the one thing that will eat you alive, especially if the market is doing negative. So now here's the bright side. So let's say the market's going down negative 25%, right? And people are losing their money. Most people going down 25%. You're not going down 25%, but your policy still has one. You have your cost of insurance. So basically, they still have the cost to insure you, and then you also have the management fees because you also have an investment money vehicle. This is something where it's very important that you actually go and itemize with an actual financial professional before you go ahead and get this done. So IUL, so Index Universal Life Insurance spreads are like management fees. Spreads are expressed as a percentage. So if an Index Universal Life Insurance policy has a 2% spread, the cash value will be credited to gross index return less than the spread. So what does that mean? Is they take their cut. Okay, that's basically the thing about it. Is they take the cut, which is a 2% spread. So you kind of want to pick something with a low spread and a higher cap rate. Okay, low spread, higher cap rate, and a decent floor. You can get something with a floor of 1% or 2%. And there's some companies that might. This is all depends. That might give you a 1% or 2% floor. What does that mean? That means that if the market does negative 25%, you stopped at 2%. And if they have a spread of 1%, that's kind of like you get a 1% almost. You almost make money, right? So think about it like, it's like cash back on your credit card, on your credit card if you had a cash back credit card. Those are kind of things to keep in mind. Now, go ahead and check it out. Now, I don't have anything right now to say as far as like what I recommend as far as Index Universal Life, and it has to do with life insurance. So, but definitely go ahead and stay tuned, guys. And I recommend you just go ahead if you want to get any up-to-date news as far as what I'm up to. If you want to be someone who's like, hey, Manuel, I love the channel, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the video. But if you want to go ahead and pretty much get up-to-date news, and what you want to do is you want to go ahead and join my newsletter. Okay, join my newsletter, and you want to join the newsletter by basically you want to go to learnwithigwe.com. Okay, you guys want to join the newsletter by going to learnwithigwe.com. Go to learnwithigwe.com to sign up and join the newsletter today. And when you join the newsletter, you're going to basically get tools and tips and tricks as to how you can go ahead and maintain a financial literacy. You're going to get tools and tips as far as AI. You're going to get tools and tips as far as business. This newsletter is free, and I'm basically emailing you for free. So go ahead and join the newsletter, guys. And if you want to go ahead and get new up-to-date news as far as whenever I come up with something new, join my weekly newsletter, learnwithigwe.com. And obviously, guys, is like you say, every time I say this, enjoy. It's a pleasure having everyone on board. You guys watching me right now today, and then you guys watching me live. Thank you, everybody. You guys have a great day. And like I like to say every time,